Welcome to the final webinar of our Navigate webinar series of 2020 from the Northeast Clean Energy Council. My name is Kristina Madeira and I run the Navigate program. Today, the webinar is dedicated to the utility market, and our guests will be talking as well about trends and innovation. This webinar series has the invaluable support from all Navigate sponsors, such as the state agency NYSERDA, who works to advance energy innovation, technology, and investment in New York State. Thank you very much for your support. And before passing the word to our guests, I'd like to kindly remind you to stay on mute and for you to remind you as well to send us your questions using the Q&A feature on Zoom. And at the end, you'll receive a very short survey that we'd very much appreciate if you could complete, please, because your feedback is very important to us and our sponsors. And tweet with us using the handle NECEC Live. And now it is my pleasure to hand over this webinar to Raghu Madabushi, Director at National Grid Partners, and Kristina Lund, President at AES US Utilities. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Katerina. Hope everybody is, first of all, staying safe and healthy, their loved ones all staying safe and healthy. And thanks again to New York and Clean Tech Navigate and NECEC for having us over. So quickly about National Grid itself, we are a utility in the Northeast and in the UK, or in the UK and in the Northeast. Mandate is to sort of drive the edge of energy innovation, if you will, the next generation of and the future of the transition to broadly three things: decarbonization, decentralization, and digitization. I'm sure you've heard of it. Within National Grid, we have a arm that is managing innovation called the National Grid Partners, and I'm part of National Grid Partners. The mandate for National Grid Partners is to make investments, meaning invested startups in the broader energy space, and also sort of foster innovation within National Grid. So we do have initiatives where we sort of spin in and spin out entrepreneurial ideas from within the organization as well. The focus is mainly around sort of think of it as emerging technologies overlapping with the broader energy space, and the overlap is where we play. Sort of software and energy for a more smarter and renewable future, if you will. We do invest in both sort of for strategic and financial returns. You'll hear a lot about strategic and financial returns. We do both. We want to have financial returns, so we are very aligned with a typical VC, but we also want some of these investments to be very strategic to National Grid. And there's both an early stage investing team and a later stage investing team within National Grid Partners. And yeah, so love to hear more from Kristina as well. Kristina, you want to go ahead?
Yes, thanks, Raghu, and thanks to Katerina and the hosts and organizers of this event. This is a great way to conclude 2020, so thank you very much for the invitation. So again, my name is Kristina Lund, and I am with AES, and I'm president of our US Utilities. And just a little bit about AES to give you some context. AES is an international energy company. We operate in markets around the world. And we are primarily focused on electricity generation, transmission, and distribution. And we have large platforms with some or all of those business lines in 14 countries. And in addition to that, we have scalable ecosystems for innovation. And so in particular, you may be familiar with Fluence, which is a joint venture that we have with Siemens. And we are one of the leading providers of battery energy storage in the world. We are also an investor in Uplight, which is a digital customer engagement platform. And finally, we recently announced an investment in 5B, which is a solar technology innovator in Australia. And so we really see these scalable ecosystems as key to the future of energy. And we are growing those businesses across the United States and internationally. So I've been with AES now coming up on 15 years, and I've worked with most of our businesses in the portfolio over that time period. I've lived internationally with AES. I spent 1 year in Europe, covering Europe and Asia, and then also lived for 2 years in Panama with overseeing the financial matters for our Mexico, Central America, and Caribbean business unit. And then, as I mentioned, right now, I am president of the US Utilities. This is a role that I took recently, and we have 2 regulated electric utilities. We have Indianapolis Power and Light in Indiana, and we have Dayton Power and Light in Ohio. And between these 2 platforms, we serve 1 million customers in those states. And today, as we go through this, I will focus my comments on both innovation and opportunities for startups and early stage investing at the AES level, at the parent company and corporate level, as well as at the utility level, where I'm currently spending most of my time. Just a couple of comments quickly, if that's all right, about the innovation, both at the AES level and at the utilities. So first, at the global level, we're really proud that we were nominated to the list of the best workplace for innovators by Fast Company this year. And as you may expect, there were not too many utility companies on that list, and we were very, very pleased to be included there. And so just how we've thought about innovation and engagement with startups at the parent company is really twofold. One is we've had a long-standing program for innovation called APEX. And what we do there is we encourage every single employee in the company to pitch ideas for how to make our core business more efficient and provide better service for our customers. But we also have a group called AES Next, which is our business and technology incubator. And AES Next has been involved, if not leading, all of those scalable ecosystems that I mentioned earlier. So the leadership of AES Next pioneered grid scale battery energy storage. AES Next began our relationship with the predecessor companies to Uplight. And one of our most successful acquisitions by folks in AES Next was a solar company, a distributed solar company called Main Street Power, which is now AES Distributed Energy. And AES Distributed Energy has a number of projects in New York. In fact, we have more than 100 megawatts operating across New York, including in demand zones for PSEG, Orange and Rockland, National Grid, and Rochester Gas and Electric. And some of our customers in New York are Anheuser-Busch, Columbia University, as well as some community solar customers. We're also present, AES Distributed Energy also has projects across New England, including in Rhode Island and in Massachusetts. And we have a lot of energy storage and solar energy projects in development and operations across New England and New York. So those are great markets for us. And really, AES Next overall is looking for the next big potential revenue stream for AES. And so this is where most of our engagement with startups and the next technology happens. And so the final thing I'll mention is just how does innovation happen at the regulated utility level? And so at the regulated utility level, we do not make equity investments into early stage companies, but we do have a long track record of partnering with early stage companies to develop proof of concept or proof of solution projects that can help us to provide better service to our customers and also provide new and innovative services to our customers. And so just a couple examples of that was the first battery energy storage project that we did was actually at a substation of IPL. And so that, was a very important proof of solution project for us. On the digital side, IPL has worked with Uplight to allow customers access to technologies through its marketplace that will help customers optimize energy usage in the home. And then finally, there is an electric vehicle company called Motor that provides electric vehicle kind of services to reduce the friction of adoption of electric vehicles in Indianapolis. And that is a company that has partnered with IPL in looking at how to increase EV adoption in Indianapolis. I'm a Motor customer, huge fan of the service. That's an aside. So anyway, those are my comments about innovation at the parent company and at the utility level. And thanks again for the invite. This is a great opportunity to talk about what's next.
Thanks, Kristina. This is I mean, the perspective is extremely valuable. So I'm really interested in, getting to know more. So I see you have a set of portfolios of trends or technologies that you're not chasing, but that you're making real. So typically, if you wear a US-based utility hat and think through the energy future and say, what are those key problems that potentially, and over a 5 to 10 year period, what are those key problems that you think need to be addressed, whether it's from a startup point of view or from a utility point of view? But it'll be interesting to get your perspective.
Sure, absolutely. So our mission or purpose at AES is to accelerate the future of energy together. And that word together is really important because we believe very strongly that the future of energy requires not only energy companies, but strong partnerships with our customers, with our communities, and with many diverse business partners. And, what we see really as the future of energy is eventually we expect energy will be carbon-free and fully and we expect a full adoption of digital technologies to help us get there. And so just as a starting point, roughly a little bit more than 2/3 of energy generation in the United States, of electricity generation in the United States, is from coal and gas. And so obviously this vision of carbon-free is something that is in the future, and we need to think very hard about the transition to that future. And so as we think about the transition, what we need to do is have all of our current technologies work together differently with new technologies so that we are optimizing first reliability for our customers. That does remain essential. And we've all experienced that during COVID, that if we didn't have our reliable energy during this very difficult year, this kind of work from home and all of the new ways that we've learned to work and collaborate would not have been possible. So reliability during this period is essential. Secondly, we need to keep a laser focus on affordability because, it's been a difficult year economically, and we all want the economy to recover as quickly as possible. And so affordability will be very important during this transition. And then as I think about the opportunities to solve these challenges of reliability, affordability, and then of course, better environmental performance, we really see 4 key areas for investment and focus. So one is rapid deployment of renewables and battery energy storage, and then really the kind of the peripheral technologies that are needed to make those technologies work together better to achieve the reliability, affordability, and environmental objectives. So we expect that, and this has been true already in the United States for a long time, that most new power generation investment has been going into renewables And we expect that to continue because the technologies will continue to get more efficient and less expensive for customers. The second bucket is really digital tools. And here, this is on the first side is really about how can we make our generation, transmission, distribution assets operate more efficiently and achieve better reliability for our customers. And our customers now are used to, Amazon 24/7, availability of products and services. And so the bar is being raised for utilities, and we need to figure out how we can achieve our customers, how we can serve our customers' needs now and get to the future expectations that they have for us. Then the third element of it, but very related to digital, is what we call the grid of the future. And it's a concept of advanced energy networks. And so the future of energy is not going to be only centralized power stations that transmit and distribute energy in one direction, but we're going to have distributed resources all throughout our network. And we need the network to be able to synchronize and orchestrate all of these different devices and sources and uses of energy in a more optimal way. Again, always focused on reliability, affordability, and environmental. And so digital tools will help us operate more efficiently, but also orchestrate and optimize differently. And finally, and I think most importantly, is our customers are now expecting new services from us. It's no longer enough just to provide the electrons, but we need to help our customers achieve their business goals, their sustainability goals, and personal goals that they have at home and at the workplace. And so I see utilities now investing in new services that will serve our customers now and into the future. So those are really our big buckets for utility investment.
Super. I mean, it's actually interestingly, it's very aligned. It's not surprising. It's pretty aligned with what National Grid has been talking about. Here they capture it as the 3 Ds, right? So you touched on decarbonization quite a bit. I think just to add to what you touched on, there are things around efficient homes like heating, thermal efficiency. I've heard about negative emission systems, like carbon capture, biomass storage. So all of that, I think, falls in that decarbonization thing. And then, you also touched on decentralization. I think the whole sort of IoT sort of backbone, if you will, to drive that decentralization is something that we've called out quite a bit. And my mandate obviously is more around digitization. So, I'm sort of hunting with a digitization roadmap and playbook. So we can touch a little bit on that as well.
That would be great. All right, what are sort of some of your themes for the early stage investing, and in particular with digitization, because that's such a huge topic these days?
I think the way we look at it is in 2 buckets. One is sort of infrastructure within the enterprise, or digital infrastructure within the enterprise. So everything around cloud, data management, decision making, cybersecurity, all of those things. And obviously you have technology buckets as well, AI, machine learning. There's a lot of distributed ledger related technologies that are becoming more adopted. So that's digital and data infrastructure within the enterprise. And then, like you touched on, operational performance and efficiency, that's a little bit outside of the enterprise. So asset management. The way I looked at it was, there is data infrastructure, so everything around compute infrastructure, the traditional IT infrastructure, and then there is the operational side of things, operational infrastructure, IoT, even AI and all that falls in that broader. If you have a network of assets, how do you optimize them? How do you manage their life cycles? How do you get operational visibility? So all that needs to be instrumented. There are like sensor systems and all that. So those are the two buckets that are themes that we are very interested in.
That's great. That seems very consistent with the way we're thinking about it.
From your like, are you seeing some emerging themes around some of these areas, in these broad buckets?
Yeah. So right now we have large programs under deployment. So I'm going to talk for a minute at the utilities level. So we have large smart grid programs under development in both Indiana and Ohio. And so that's, you know, a digital component of it, as well as some hardware associated with that. And in addition, we have some procurement going on the generation side. But as I think, and again, that speaks to the decarbonization and the renewables and battery energy storage. In addition to that, we are looking at, you know, at the AES level now. Our AES Next group, as I mentioned, is a business and technology incubator. And so maybe I should talk for a little bit about how we look at that. So we have a dedicated group and a target funding level of roughly 10% of our investment cash flow. Excuse me. And so what that could mean is actually up to, say, $300 million for investment through AES Next over the next 5 years. So that's a very sizable pool of funds for investment. And what we're looking at there is for early stage companies that are focused on the next thing. That's why we call it AES Next. But then something that would be new to our AES portfolio. And as we think about what that could be, it's very important that customer focus and the next step change experience in customer service is one of our key screening criteria. And then the other thing we do is we really focus on technologies and solutions that have applicability across our platform. And yes, it's great if there is a benefit to the core business from these new technologies, but that's actually one component. But what we really want to do is use our AES global platforms to accelerate the development of the new idea or revenue stream. And so, you know, a lot of times strategic investors look to what can they add to their core business. And of course we like that. But really what we want to do is say, hey, we have this huge portfolio. How can we accelerate the new ideas by partnering and collaborating across this portfolio? And we think that's a bit of a differentiator for how we think about it. Do you have something kind of similar? What are some of the ways that your technologies are benefiting from the partnership with the National Grid overall organization?
Yeah, I think so. There are, I think I touched on it. There are three broad groups within the National Grid partners, right? Within my organization. One is the later stage investing team. So they are making very strategic, but equity investments in startups. And this is a little bit more mature startups, meaning these are, they already have products and services that can be deployed or are already deployed within the broader National Grid, family. So those tend to be very strategic. Not to say they are not sort of horizon technologies. It's still technologies that you cannot acquire from established technology companies, right? So that's one. The second bucket is the group that I'm part of within NGP, where we are looking very much in a 5+ year horizon. So it's very unlikely that some of these technologies, they don't even have products that can be quickly deployed, but we do feel that this is where the puck is going. So we want to anticipate where the industry is going and where National Grid's needs are, and we want to look at National Grid as an archetype for the broader utility space. So that's the second bucket. And then the third bucket is interesting, which is we still want to engage with the business units to surface sort of innovation or ideas from inside out. There's the outside in perspective, but there is this team that is looking at, okay, encourage employees to come up with ideas, or at least come up with problems that are worth solving, and provide the toolkit to have them go through the process of figuring out, okay, how can I address these problems? Is this problem worth going and solving? So those are the three sort of broad sort of legs of the stool that we've seen work. Yeah. Do you want to take? There are a bunch of questions coming up. I'm wondering if we should try and address one or two.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, the first one is more around suggestion to take a look at better cleaning technologies. I will spend some time on that. The second one is around, do you see biomass-based electricity generation relevant from a decarbonization perspective? Is there potential for new dispatchable small hydro in your utilities in the US and Europe? You should address it. I mean, biomass is something that is explicitly called out, so we are looking at that. But love to have you touch on it.
Sure, I'm happy to. Do you want to talk about the cooling one first, the cleaning and cooling? Did you say you wanted to address that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So what I can say on that question is, so we have through Uplight a marketplace where our customers can purchase devices for the home that will help with energy optimization. So the thing that comes to mind for me is say smart thermostats and other technologies like that will help customers have a very seamless experience in terms of locating the right technology, getting it installed, and then to the extent that there are incentives provided through energy efficiency programs in a particular area, the marketplace can also help tap into those rebates and other programs. And so we do see that this type of service of helping our customers achieve their objectives by whatever device could work for them and making sure that they have access to the programs and savings from that is a very important service that we're doing now and look to do more of that in the future. What are the programs that you have related to kind of building optimization on the heating and cooling side?
I'm not, like I said,
Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you said you did want to. Yeah.
I said I'll spend some time understanding what that is. Meaning I'll take some time out and read it, but no.
Got it. No, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm looking more at the IT infrastructure and sort of the data infrastructure. Those are the areas that I can touch on.
Great.
There's one other interesting question around how do you look at time horizons in your investment strategy? Do you anticipate being able to help accelerate, I guess, and quickly scale innovative technology? So I can touch a little bit and love your perspective. Like I said, there are at least two time horizons that we are looking at. For the strategic ones that are more, think of them as series, B and later, they already have some products that are already deployed in the marketplace. So these are startups that can ramp up pretty fast. And then there are sort of beyond the horizon technologies, which our team typically invests in. And for those, I know the word disruptive is overused these days, but that's the bucket that we are looking to invest in, meaning very risky, but with a large both financial return and from an impact point of view, something that can reinvent the technology stack or the infrastructure stack. So that's more a 3 to 7 year time horizon, and hence the expectation from the types of problems that they are going after will be much different. Meaning, we want them to be going after large problems as opposed to sort of incremental. So we're really looking at 10x type problems in whatever axis you look at. Love your, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So for us, for AES Next, we really look at the kind of medium term, I would call it medium term horizon of 3 to 5 years. And so our screening is based on a few things. So one is the time horizon, say 3 to 5 years. We're looking for it to have the potential to be a material contributor to AES overall. As I mentioned earlier, we're really looking for technologies and solutions that have a step change in client experience. So we see a lot of potential to be creating new products and services for our customers. And so that's something that we're very focused on in our screening. And then the other thing I mentioned is a very good collaboration potential with the core business so that we can help the technology and solution develop faster and achieve scale faster. So that's kind of how we think about the, I will just a couple of things. I do want to make sure I'm clear that we look at investments of many different sizes. So we sometimes do investments down in the $1 million. We do have, like I mentioned, up to $300 million over the next 5 years, but we do look at investments of many sizes. So there's not like a threshold that says it has to be, say, $20 million or something like that. In fact, we just did a Series A of under $10 million recently. And really, as we think about our investments, what we want to help the portfolio companies do is really prove the solution. And a lot of times, if we can do that on our platform, that helps everybody. We want to help them then prove the commercial viability of the project or solution. And then finally, develop a pathway to scale. And so our activities are really focused on an initial project that will prove the solution, then how do we commercialize it? And finally, how do we make it big? And to do that, we really focus on understanding, obviously, the technology or solution, but then also what are the challenges? What are the business pain points and constraints? Because we have this portfolio of companies, we may be able to address those in ways where other investors cannot. And so we want to work together with our portfolio companies to kind of identify the pain points and then find a way together to solve them. Is that similar to your approach?
I think you touched on something. I think in some ways this is a logical transition to now. We touched on a few themes from the utility energy industry point of view. If we look at it from I am a startup, or this is what I'm trying to build. What are the things I should be looking out for? So you touched on a few things. One is the need to sort of pick the right problem, because the classic quote is startups fail not because they don't have the right solution. They 90% of the startups fail because they've not picked the right problem to go after. There are some very, very broad characteristics that you can attach to some of these problems. One, you want them to be big enough so that as you build solutions, you can capture much larger value. But you touched on something very interesting, which is as a startup, as you validate some of these problems by working with the utilities, you can get to some really interesting use cases, which almost seems like the first step. for you to validate your problems by working with the business units and for them to give you feedback. That seems like because especially for a startup, it's one thing to sell sort of to consumers, and it's very difficult. I get that. It's another thing to sell to enterprises. That's also difficult. I get that. But it's like one layer above that. They sell to utilities. Man, it's like a regulated industry. There's like so many things that a typical startup wouldn't expect. So partnering with whether it's a capital partner or a strategic partner, partnering with the utility at that early stage when you're trying to validate the problem, it's not even product market fit. I'm talking like problem solution fit at that stage. Seems like extremely valuable for a startup. I wonder what you've heard along those lines.
Yes, no, I would agree with that completely. And so, what we try to do, if someone were to say, what advice would you give to someone looking to partner with a strategic investor in energy, and a company like, say, National Grid or AES? There's a few things that I would say. One is we're looking for exponential growth in something new. And so it's important that we can understand what the addressable market is, how sizable could that be? And so having some very good data and ability to lay out that potential and will help. We're of course, we've got our own perspective and can add to that, but that's really the first thing that we're going to look at. Secondly is we do have capital available for investment in companies of all sizes, but we're not just capital. And so for us, there does need to be a good angle for collaboration across the portfolio. And again, it's not only to just how can we make our core better, but really how can our core help the new technology? Thirdly would be, what are the pain points? What are the challenges that this business is finding in rolling out a new solution or technology? And then collaborating with us to try and understand, is there a way our core can help overcome some of those challenges, or at least, figure out how to develop a plan to address them over time. And then finally, having a recommendation for a proof of solution project. So a lot of times it's easier to start off with something kind of small, where there's a clear view of where we want to go, but let's prove first that we can do it. Let's work together and find the right application for this technology and show that it can be done, because nothing builds success like a little bit of success to start. So we really do look for a way to kind of add on in a small way, see that it works, and then iterate from there. Really, if we can show that this, for us to test the service is a great way to start a relationship with us. What advice would you give to?
I like the crawl, walk, run paradigm that you touched on. I think, I wouldn't say advice, but what I'm seeing is, given it's a regulated utility, there are things that the utility can and cannot do. Typically these deployments have to be competitive, and it's almost like keeping the church and state separate here. We as the investor cannot influence the business unit to necessarily adopt one over the other, even if it's a portfolio company. But there is scope to doing early POCs, smaller scale, which is kind of what you were hinting at, meaning start with a very focused use case, very focused like proof point that you really want to prove out, especially for the very early stage. If you're much later stage, then you want to compete with others, and yes, but for the early stage, I think going from here's a limited proof point more for yourself to validate that the problem is indeed real, and the problem is indeed worth solving, and problem is indeed sort of valuable to solve, I think is, early stage. I keep telling, almost like use the MVP as a means to learn about the problem than about actually deploying the solution. It's very difficult to do, but it's just a mindset, at least for the software and services and products. It seems like that's how you can de-risk quite a bit early on. You can make a lot of mistakes early on, and that's what the investor in many ways pays you to do, meaning they want you to explore around the problem and validate the problem. So yeah.
I see just on the chat, maybe there are a couple questions on hydrogen, biomass, and hydro, and I realized that I forgot to comment on those earlier. So maybe I'll jump in there just for a minute if that's good for you.
No, that's useful. I don't have anything to add, so you should take.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm happy to. So, so in terms of the future of generation, of energy generation, electricity generation, we do see that in many markets, renewables, and in particular solar and wind, are becoming the lowest cost, if not already the lowest cost source of energy in most geographies across the United States. However, obviously the sun doesn't shine all the time, the wind doesn't blow all the time, and we are believers that it will take a combination of technologies to get to the energy future. In terms of biomass, this is one that can, in the industry we call it dispatchable, but biomass is a technology that can be used to fill in gaps for when, say, other renewables are not available. So the application can work well, and it does depend a lot though on the specific circumstance, because the fuel for the biomass, whether it's wood pellets or other kinds of biomass, ultimately do need to be very cost competitive. And so if you have to ship the wood pellets, a very long distance, those types of things can make it more challenging. But I do think that there will be a role for biomass in certain locations where the fuel is readily available and the prices support it. For hydro, that is it's a great resource. AES has a number of hydro facilities, mostly in Latin America. I used to work in Panama, as I mentioned, and Panama is a great country for hydro, Brazil. And so hydro is a really important energy resource, and we see it remaining that way. It is generally hard to do new hydro projects. And so it's hard to imagine that there's going to be a lot of new large significant hydro projects. We don't see that. However, we do see opportunities on kind of new use cases for existing hydro plants and, looking at repowerings and other things. And so there's some really interesting innovation going on there. So we do expect some growth in hydro, but again, just sort of some of the natural constraints around, there's already a lot of hydro that's been done. And because it is more difficult to implement, we think those are some of the pressures there, but definitely it's a part of the solution. In terms of hydrogen is very interesting. And so as I think about emerging themes on the generation side, green hydrogen is one that's getting a lot more attention these days. And I would expect that will continue as the cost of renewables comes down and you're able to produce the hydrogen at a more economic cost, a more competitive cost, that hydrogen will be a part of the solution. Again, what's so interesting is that because wind and solar are just coming down so fast, it puts a lot of pressure on new technologies to be competitive. And so that's the thing that we're still waiting for, is a real breakthrough on the cost of hydrogen. But certainly there's a lot of great companies focused on it and working on it. And I think it's definitely possible that the cost competitiveness could be there in kind of the medium term time frame. So I hope that answers the
fascinating perspective. Yeah. I can, so on the investment side itself, what is the smallest investment size, sweet spot? Like I said, there are two buckets. Since I'm looking more at the early stage, we can go as early as pre-seed, which is a fancy word for saying, oh, it's a couple of folks with an idea and PowerPoint and understand what they want to go solve and maybe have some, I don't want to say track record, but some idea of why they are the ones that should be, we'll take a bet on them. But typically the sweet spot is seed stage deals, which is they've built an MVP, have maybe a couple of core customers giving them feedback. They understand and they've validated the problem to be interesting. So seeds the sort of quintessential sweet spot for us, but we'll also go Series A. So that's in the early stage. Now in the later stage, we can go, all the way from Series B to much later on. And we will lead, meaning we'd actually prefer to lead the rounds and, at least to co-lead, simply because we want to take a board position. We want to be active in the sense that we want to enable this rollout within the broader energy ecosystem. So being on the board helps us provide a lot of feedback and sort of help the team. So we want to be not just the capital partner, but also like a strategic partner early on. Any other points back from your side on your typical sweet spot? I think you mentioned something around, going across the spectrum.
Yeah, no, it's really this collaboration with our core and how we can accelerate. The other thing that comes to mind is, when National Grid Partners has made an investment, what have you seen to be the key success factors for the entrepreneur or startup that now has this investment from a large strategic? What are some of the things that you think have really made certain projects very successful, and what are the learnings there?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Again, it also depends on whether it's what stage the startup is in. For the early stage ones, it's no different from what a typical VC would consider as the key drivers for the success, right? And we want to be very aligned with sort of financial investors. And you always start with the team. It seems like so overplayed, but in many ways we are, the bet is on the team. There are two schools where one school is bets on the team early on, and there's another school which really talks about placing a bet on the problem that you want to go solve. There's no one right thing. I think given that we look for technology moats within the startup to be successful in the early stage, we are already dealing with technology risk. And if it's technologies that are addressing critical infrastructure, you also have a little bit of product risk around that. And then given its early stage, there is always market risk, right? So the best resource that is equipped to deal with this is the team. So we really, at the early stage, really look for teams that understand the space and potentially have done it before, but we're more than happy to partner with first-time entrepreneurs, but teams that are extremely comfortable with the problem that they're trying to solve. And like I mentioned, some sustainable differentiated something. It could be technology, which is the obvious one, but it could also be product. You may be building something which has natural moats around the product itself. We typically don't look for sort of opportunities where the team is sort of first to market, and that is their, meaning we'll perpetually be 6 months ahead of the competition. I'm not saying that's a bad strategy per se, but that's not our personal mandate to go and invest. How do you look at sort of evaluating some of these opportunities for yourself?
Yeah, no, I think yes, certainly we look a lot at the team, and then of course, and really a fit with our values. And so actually first it has to be alignment with our purpose. And so the future, accelerating the future of energy. So we're not going to stray from that. And then, yes, the team is a really important part of it. And what we've found is, so AES has a style internally. We call it it's a value that we have by how we work together, but collaboration is incredibly important. And so we have a value called all together. And that's really important as we're looking with at new investments is the team that's part of this technology or solution going to be a good collaborator? Can they work all together with AES? And I'll be honest that we have had to work on this over the years. So, and this, when you're a part of a really large company, there's a lot of requirements that come along with that. We've got a lot of financial reporting requirements. We've got all kinds of environmental health and safety requirements. We have compliance. We have all kinds of legal programs. And so what we've needed to do over the years is figure out the way to right size our interaction with earlier stage companies so that we're not overwhelming the team with our requirements on top of the very important job that the team's already managing, which is, getting this technology off the ground and finding the proof of solution, commercial viability, and then that path to scale. And so we've worked hard over the years to kind of right size our touch with the earlier stage companies. One thing that we found is once an investment is made, we really need to identify the people within the core who are going to adopt the new technology and be champions for it. Because oftentimes what we find is, before we make an investment, we think there's a specific pathway and application. But what's really cool is that once you get the solution into our portfolio, you can apply it in new ways that we hadn't even thought about. And actually, so energy storage is an interesting example of this. We did our first 1 megawatt project at a substation in Indiana at IPL. One of our first larger projects was actually at one of our power plants in Chile, which when we implemented the battery was able to help our power plant release some of its spinning reserves and increase basically the utilization of the plant. So, but when we also had different applications in PJM. And so, we had an idea when the battery business started of how it could be commercialized, but we found more and new and even in some cases better ways of using the technology across the portfolio. And so really finding the people who are going to be champions for the technology or solution and then helping them work the network to figure out what are the new and better ways that it can be used in many different contexts is important.
Well, that's super pointed. I will give a shout out to two people one person and one team. So Lisa Lambert, who actually runs the ventures team, is also sort of the innovation person within National Grid. The way when she pulled the team together, a big emphasis was on what you just mentioned, which is having a separate BD team, a business development team, effectively sit with the ventures team, but like be connected to the internal business unit. So we have like super accomplished BD team whose only mandate is to find the right resources within the broader national grid business units to match them with the startup or the portfolio company. So at that early stage, we feel like you now have, as a startup, you now have a BD resource that can find you resources within the businesses to validate and get you the POC that you need and get you going. So that seems like a big portion of what it's not just capital, it's not just a typical investor's presence in the board, but it's also sort of a BD business development partner, especially at that early stage. Let's see, I think we have a good set of questions that we've addressed. Can you just pulling the thread around the partnering with the startups itself? Can you touch a little bit on how else you sort of engage with the startups, whether it's portfolio companies or even outside ecosystems, to sort of option some of these newer technologies and sort of introduce them to the internal business units?
Sure. So we do have our AES Next team, which is really our market-facing group who looks at so we have a scan of the market and new opportunities and technologies ongoing. And so part of it is we want to have, the best sense possible of what's emerging and how that could affect us and sort of what's the opportunity associated with that. And so most of our relationships form that way. And, usually what we're doing is starting to reach out and kind of understand new solutions and technologies, and then kind of figure out, is there a way that this could potentially be applied? Is there a way that we can kind of test this and see if it works for one of our businesses? And then that's really the starting point for a lot of our relationships that then can grow from there. How about for you? Any further thoughts on that one?
No, yeah, it's around that BD function, right?
Yeah.
I said teams placed a lot of emphasis, and these are individuals who are sort of attached at the hip with the business units, and there's a push and a pull, inside out, outside, and all of those things going on, where they have excellent understanding of key individuals more than anything else, who can step in and sort of shepherd the startup through the maze that a typical utility can be. So at that early stage, it becomes phenomenally useful and a value add. Okay, I think we are kind of getting close to wrapping up. Love to hear any final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, my final thought is I just think this is such an exciting moment for energy and for the electric utility sector. This is a really important industry. It's fundamental to the foundation that we need as a society, and it's been around for a long time, and we do things the way we do them for a good reason. But this is a really exciting moment, and so I'm just encouraged. There's a lot of opportunity for early stage technologies and startups, and I do encourage you to not give up and be a part of the future of energy. What about you, Raghu?
Super. No, I think why now is always you can VCs are very fond of saying no. A lot of times it's why now, right? It's always that question that trips the VCs themselves internally. So in that sense, this sort of the broader energy infrastructure side, nobody will ask you why now, because everybody knows that this is being fundamentally reinvented, and so you're never going to get this why now question. So you're already one step ahead. I'm just personally extremely thankful, given the time that we live in, that entrepreneurs are, literally putting their soul and like the whole life online, and actually building that startup that they want to go, sort of make a dent in the universe, if you will. And the very interesting thing is, typically in these downturns, that's when, whether it's correlation or causality, let's not even get into that, but these are the times when some of the massive startups get built. So I understand we are in a very difficult, we are all going, blessed to have these opportunities, but I know it's difficult times, but remember that these are great times to be starting a company. Yes, kudos to the grit and all that entrepreneurs show, but it's also, these are things that happen, come together once in a lifetime. So yeah.
Well said. I agree.